But first off, what made Fischer so good? And of course, relative to his peers, he was, that's better.
He was fantastic hard worker, and he made everything by himself, and so he understood chess very well. He knew chess theory deep and well. He made his own analysis, and he was a big fighter. He played for win each game, and that time it was not so often. I remember world champions, especially Petrosyan. He was ready to make draw almost each game.
Especially with black,
Especially with black, yes. Yeah. And even I didn't see, but people told me that in the tournaments, after drawing of lots, so Petrosyan was making his own how to say
projections,
yes, and so he was putting. Okay, with this player I make draw, with this player I try to win, or with this I win for sure.
He's like pre-filling in the scorecard.
Yeah.
Before you even shoot the round of golf, you're like, okay, I'll get a 9, an 8, a 7, a 4. Okay, very good. No, and so then the next question, of course, we can talk about this now. A few years after the match, or even shortly after the match didn't take place, a few players started noticing you started playing like knight f3 on the first move and maybe d4, and some players speculated maybe you were looking to kind of neutralize Fischer's tremendous drive for sharp positions. And so that brings to mind, what do you think it would have taken to beat a player like Fischer?
No, I made preparation, and I was ready to play sharp variations in Sicilian defense, and I realized or I understood that without these variations, I could lose advantage of white pieces. And so I prepared the things. But in general, later on, I felt that I can better control situation on the chessboard with d4 than with e4. With e4, sometimes you enter to traps opening preparation, in home preparation. And then, but with d4, so you have better and positional control.
And no, I totally agree with that, because sometimes I found as well that when I play e4, you reach certain positions, especially like in Sicilian, where you have to play a move. You have to play f5 at just the right moment, or e5, and that moment passes, and then
you win or lose.
Yeah, and whereas with d4, sometimes, okay, you can build, maybe you build, and it's not, necessarily the end of the world if that exact moment you don't play the break. And so,
no, actually, not only this, but for instance, when you play with a weak player, then you don't want to play forced variations, because at home, especially now with computers, you can make preparation, and then you have no choice during the game. And that's why I don't play forced variations. But also with a strong player, you have the same idea. That so somebody can use computer and make longer variation, longer analysis than you do, and then you just miss your chances.
Now, the other thing too, sometimes if you're playing low-rated players, and you play a forced variation, even though they don't see everything in advance, but move by move, they kind of stumble their way through it, and then they find a way to almost save the game. So,
yes.
Whereas, actually, Kasparov touched on that, is that Botvinnik really had to work with him to make him become patient and just kind of let the guy have a chance to play. Gary, you're like forcing things too much, You're not giving the guy a chance to show his true ability.
Yes.
Whereas for you, you've always, from the get-go, you've always been very patient. Even when you were very young, you had very long in-games and so forth, So, and then also, I remember after Fischer 20 years later played, and I kind of feel like he sort of played Spassky 20 years later, because kind of a known subject, and Fischer had tremendous fear of losing and so forth. And you did point out, look, Bobby played well the first couple of games, and he did win the match, and he did win 10 games, but he also lost 5 games. And so I think a little bit in looking at those 5 games that he lost, you could see a little bit of where Fischer might have been vulnerable. What do you think?
No, but you talk about 1992 match,
yes, rematch,
20 years past.
Yes.
No, that time, unfortunately, I think they played only one game when both were in good shape. Otherwise, Fischer was losing without too much resistance, and Spassky more often entered in such situation. But if we talk about 72, that match, famous match, which was one of the most historical moments in chess. So even that much, they played on the highest level, maybe how many? 12 games of that match. And then later they were exhausted, both were exhausted. And then they made mistakes. And so each game, maybe each second game could have different results.
Yeah, and of course, by the time you reach that stage of the match, Fischer had a huge lead, So
no, then he won with 21 games. Yes, plus he had +4.
Yeah.
But you see, with experience what I had, even my match with, let's say, with Kamsky, I won it before the schedule, let's say. But still, it was fight in any game, and then you have big lead, but when you have fight in each game, so you can win, you can lose.
But also in a match, I think we've seen this a few times. You mentioned the match with Kamsky, great example. Kind of on-the-job training, if you will, where the weaker, younger player starts to learn, and the second half of the match, Kamsky almost held his own. It was like close to even or something. I mean, you got a big lead early, and then a lot of tough games.
Yes, and then, of course,
same with Kasparov.
He is much younger, and so he's getting lessons.
Right,
Yeah.
You had that huge 5-0 lead, and then on-the-job training, he started getting better and better and learning,
Yeah,
and
sure.
Similar type situation. Yeah, so that's one thing with the really long match, is that the younger player starts to,
younger player has stronger nerves, more energy. Of course, when you play long match, then a young player has advantage.